You ever wondered what Jesus would actually do if he met a narcissist face to face? Would he stay silent? Would he walk away? Or would he confront them with truth they weren't ready to hear? Because here's the thing. Many of us have been taught to just be nice, to turn the other cheek, even when someone is clearly toxic, manipulative, or emotionally abusive. But when you really look at how Jesus handled prideful, self-centered people, it's not what you think. And if you're a chosen one, someone who carries light, discernment, and a deeper calling, then you'll start to see how Jesus gave us the blueprint not just for peace, but for power. In today's video, we're going to uncover the truth about spiritual narcissists, what Jesus actually did when faced with their energy, and why, yes, you need to stop second-guessing your strength. Stay with me until the end, because what you learn might just set your soul free. And if something resonates, drop a comment below like, I see it now. Or hit subscribe if you're ready to walk in truth with no fear. Let's get into it. They say Jesus was all love, all grace, all mercy, and he was. But what many forget, or often choose to overlook, is that Jesus also had fire. He had boundaries. He had discernment. He didn't just go around hugging everyone and ignoring their behavior. He saw through people, their hearts, their intentions, their masks. And when it came to narcissistic, manipulative, power-hungry individuals, he didn't play their games. He didn't sugarcoat the truth. In fact, some of his strongest words weren't directed at the so-called sinners of society. They were aimed at the religious elite, the Pharisees. These were the men who looked holy on the outside but were full of pride, control, and selfish ambition. If you read the scriptures closely, Jesus didn't flatter them. He exposed them. He called them out publicly, with no fear of who was watching. He looked them in the eye and said things like, "You whitewashed tombs. You look clean outside, but inside you're full of dead bones." Now think about that. That's not a passive comment. That's not playing nice. That's not tolerating emotional abuse wrapped in religion. That's the Son of God confronting spiritual narcissism directly. And he didn't do it to be cruel. He did it because truth matters. He did it because manipulation must be named for what it is. And he did it to protect the innocent, the ones being misled, controlled, and spiritually abused by those pretending to be righteous. Now, fast forward to today. Narcissism hasn't disappeared. It wears different faces, sometimes charming, sometimes pitiful, sometimes even spiritual. These are people who twist scripture to control others, who pretend to care but only feed their own ego, who use your kindness against you. And if you're a chosen one, someone who's wired to carry compassion, truth, and spiritual insight, then you've likely encountered this type of person more than once. Maybe they were in your family, maybe in your relationship, maybe in a church. Maybe they used your loyalty to keep you silent. And maybe you kept telling yourself, Jesus would just forgive them. I should too. But let's pause there. Because yes, Jesus preached forgiveness. But he also demonstrated something deeper, discernment. He knew when to walk away. He knew when to confront. He knew when someone was not going to change, no matter how much love was shown. He didn't stay around trying to convince the Pharisees to be better people. He didn't waste time debating them in circles. He said what needed to be said, and then he moved on. He spent his energy with the humble, the hurting, the honest. And here's where the lesson hits home. Jesus didn't entertain manipulators. He exposed them, then walked in purpose. That's exactly what chosen ones must learn to do. Because your light exposes darkness. Your truth makes liars uncomfortable. Your love triggers those who don't know how to love. And when you start stepping into your calling, the narcissist will either try to silence you, or pretend to walk with you, just to control the story. But Jesus didn't fall for any of that. He had clarity. And that clarity is your inheritance too. Being kind doesn't mean staying silent when someone crosses your boundaries. Being loving doesn't mean allowing repeated disrespect. And being spiritual doesn't mean being naive. Jesus gave us the example. Truth and love must walk together. He forgave people, yes, but forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Jesus forgave those who hurt him, but he didn't invite them back into his circle. That's a critical difference. Because if you're a chosen one, chances are you've been guilted into staying connected with someone toxic, someone who wore a mask and drained your spirit. You thought turning the other cheek meant letting them slap the other side too. But that's not what Jesus meant. He flipped tables in the temple because people were using God's name for profit. He called out hypocrisy without fear. And he wasn't afraid to say, "Woe to you," to people who acted holy but lived selfishly. That same boldness is inside you. You are not here to be manipulated. You are not here to constantly second-guess your instincts. You are here to walk in truth. And yes, that truth will offend some people. It will anger the ones who benefited from your silence. But it will also free others. It will shine light on hidden things. It will protect the ones who don't yet have a voice. That's what Jesus did, and that's what he wants you to do too. When you see narcissism hiding behind kindness, speak truth. When someone gaslights you and says you're the problem, remember, Jesus didn't apologize for being the light. And you shouldn't either. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is call something what it is. Other times, the most powerful move is to walk away with peace in your heart. Jesus did both. He was not emotionally entangled with those who sought to manipulate him. He spoke when necessary, stayed silent when wise, and always stayed aligned with purpose. That's the example. Not passive love, not endless tolerance, but bold, clear, Spirit-led truth. If you've ever felt torn between your heart and your boundaries, remember Jesus didn't entertain manipulators. He exposed them, not to shame them, but to protect others, not to win an argument, but to shine light. That's what it means to walk in truth. And that is the path of the chosen one. People often confuse forgiveness with permission, but they are not the same, not even close. And Jesus never taught us to blur those lines. Yes, he told us to forgive, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. He spoke about mercy, about letting go of bitterness, about releasing the pain so it doesn't poison your soul. Forgiveness is powerful. It's healing. But forgiveness was never meant to be a door that swings open for repeated harm. Jesus forgave the people who mocked him, betrayed him, and nailed him to a cross, but he didn't invite them back into his inner circle. He didn't follow them around, hoping they'd change. He didn't give them access to his heart again. That's the part we forget. Forgiveness is about your freedom. It's a decision. You make so your spirit stays clean. It doesn't require the other person to apologize. It doesn't even mean they're safe. Some people will never see the damage they've done. Some will keep smiling in your face while slowly draining your light. And that's why access must be earned. You can love someone from a distance. You can pray for them. You can release the bitterness from your chest and still say, "You don't get to hurt me again." Jesus had boundaries. He knew who to trust and who to keep at arm's length. When he was in danger, he slipped away. When he sensed deception, he stayed silent. That wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. So many chosen ones struggle with guilt. Guilt for pulling away. Guilt for saying no. Guilt for blocking that call or walking out that door. But let this truth sink in deep. Jesus never told you to stay in a situation that damages your soul. He never told you to be someone's emotional punching bag. He called you to walk in truth and protect the treasure he placed in you. And sometimes protecting that treasure means locking the gate. Not out of hate, but out of wisdom. Forgive freely, yes, but give access carefully. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table, just because you once loved them. Not everyone deserves a second chance to tear you down. Jesus shows us what fierce love looks like. It's not love without limits. It's love with discernment. It's love that says, "I bless you, but I will not bleed for you again." That's not bitterness. That's not rebellion. That's spiritual maturity. And it might just be the lesson that sets your heart free. Let's get something straight. Being spiritually awakened does not mean you're supposed to let people walk all over you. Being a chosen one doesn't mean you have to smile through disrespect, pretend not to see the red flags, or keep making excuses for people who keep hurting you. Somewhere along the way, people started confusing softness with weakness. They started thinking that compassion meant silence, and patience meant staying stuck in painful places. But let me tell you the truth. Chosen ones are not doormats. You were not chosen to be used, stepped on, or emotionally drained. You were chosen to carry light, to walk in truth, and to live with discernment. That means you see what others ignore. You feel what others try to numb. And you know when something is off, even when no one else wants to admit it. The problem is, when you're a deeply empathetic soul, you attract people who feed off that energy. Narcissists, manipulators, emotional leeches, they are drawn to your light like moths to a flame. And when you've been raised to turn the other cheek, you might start believing that love means letting them stay. But Jesus never called his people to be doormats. He never asked the righteous to stay silent in the face of injustice. He didn't say, "Let them use you until you break." No, he stood tall in truth. He protected his space. He didn't allow people to twist his mission or drain his energy. He called things out. He walked away when needed. And he never lowered his light to make others comfortable. That's your example. You can be loving and still have boundaries. You can forgive someone and still choose to walk away. You can show grace without giving someone another chance to destroy your peace. Being spiritually awakened means you see clearly. And when you see clearly, you're not meant to tolerate what others choose to ignore. Your light is powerful. Your purpose is sacred. And just because your heart is kind doesn't mean it's a welcome mat for the broken, the manipulative, or the cruel. You were chosen to walk boldly, not quietly shrink into the background of someone else's drama. So stand firm. Speak truth. And don't ever confuse spiritual awakening with self-abandonment. You were never meant to dim yourself to keep the peace. Chosen ones don't play small. And they certainly don't bow to abuse disguised as love. Not every smiling face is safe. Not every soft voice is pure. And not everyone who quotes scripture has a heart for God. Jesus knew this. He didn't just warn us about the obvious enemies. He warned us about the hidden ones, the wolves in sheep's clothing, the ones who dress in kindness but hide control underneath it, the ones who say God bless you with their mouths but carry manipulation in their hearts. These are spiritual narcissists, masters of disguise. And Jesus didn't stay silent about them. In fact, some of his strongest words were reserved for this very type of person. Those who use God's name to elevate themselves, gain power, and spiritually control others. He called them blind guides, hypocrites, whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but filled with rot on the inside. And he didn't just say it once. Again and again, he called out their false humility and their performative righteousness. He said, "Beware of false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves." Why did he say this? Because spiritual narcissism is dangerous. It's not just deception, it's spiritual abuse. It confuses good-hearted people. It entangles chosen ones in emotional guilt and obligation. It makes you question your intuition, your worth, and sometimes even your relationship with God. A spiritual narcissist will twist scripture to suit their narrative. They will use your desire to please God as a tool to control you. They might say, "If you really had love, you wouldn't speak up." Oh, God wants unity, not division, right after they've crossed every boundary you set. They'll preach about forgiveness, but never take accountability. They'll cry about grace, but lack empathy. And in public, they'll appear kind, holy, and respected, but in private, they'll make you feel small, confused, and spiritually drained. That's the power of sheep's clothing. It makes the wolf look safe. But Jesus saw through all of it. He didn't hesitate to call it what it was. He wasn't afraid to offend the powerful or speak truth where others stayed quiet. Because spiritual narcissism thrives in silence. It thrives when people are too afraid to challenge authority, too scared to trust their own discernment. And if you're a chosen one, someone spiritually awake, emotionally sensitive, and deeply aligned with truth, then you've likely felt the sting of this deception. Maybe it was a leader who made you feel like your pain didn't matter. Maybe it was a parent who quoted verses but never showed real love. Maybe it was a partner who used prayer as performance, but their heart was filled with pride. And maybe you stayed longer than you should have because you were trying to do the right thing. But Jesus never asked you to ignore the red flags. He never told you to stay loyal to the lie. In fact, he told you to watch out. He gave you eyes to see and a spirit that discerns what's hidden. And that's not rebellion. That's wisdom. Spiritual narcissists hate exposure. That's why they target the soft-hearted. That's why they guilt chosen ones into silence. But the truth is, your voice matters. Your clarity matters. Your inner knowing is a gift. Jesus didn't walk in fear of upsetting people. He walked in alignment with his Father's will. He flipped tables. He told uncomfortable truths. He let people walk away. And he never watered down his message to protect someone's ego. He saw through their fake fasting, their loud prayers, their need for public praise. And he said, they already have their reward. What he meant was, God sees the heart. And no amount of spiritual showmanship can cover up pride. That's the message chosen ones need to remember. Just because someone knows scripture doesn't mean they know God. Just because someone uses holy words doesn't mean their heart is clean. And just because someone looks like a shepherd doesn't mean they aren't a wolf. This is hard to accept sometimes. Because when you're spiritually awake, you want to believe in people. You want to believe that everyone means well. You want to believe that if you love hard enough, it'll change them. But Jesus never asked you to be naive. He didn't say, ignore the fruit and focus on the leaves. No, he said, you will know them by their fruits. Not by how many verses they quote, but how they treat others when no one's watching. Not by how often they pray, but by how they handle power, pressure, and people's hearts. So if you've been hurt by a spiritual narcissist, know this, Jesus sees it. He doesn't expect you to stay quiet. He doesn't want you to carry that shame or confusion. And he certainly doesn't want you to keep giving access to someone who only brings harm. Chosen ones are not here to be silenced by spiritual manipulation. You were given discernment for a reason. Your voice carries weight. Your truth shakes the lies. And your heart, no matter how bruised, is still aligned with the divine. So speak. Walk away. Set boundaries. And never feel guilty for protecting your peace. Jesus did it. And he gave you permission to do the same. Spiritual wolves may come in soft tones and holy robes, but once you see them for who they are, you don't have to entertain their games. You can love them from a distance. You can forgive without giving access. And most importantly, you can walk in truth, because truth always exposes what sheep's clothing was trying to hide. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. And Jesus showed us exactly that. We often picture him as always available, always teaching, always present. But if you look closely, you'll see something deeper, something wiser. Even Jesus walked away. Not because he lacked compassion, but because he had discernment. He knew when his presence was no longer valued. He knew when hearts were too hardened to receive truth. And he didn't stay where his purpose was being drained by prideful resistance. In fact, the scriptures tell us that he left towns when people rejected him. He didn't chase them. He didn't beg to be understood. He walked away in peace. And that peace wasn't weakness. It was power. There were moments when the Pharisees tried to trap him with clever questions, laced with spiritual manipulation. But Jesus didn't fall for it. Sometimes, he gave a short answer. Sometimes, he answered with another question. And sometimes, he just stayed silent. That silence shook the room. Because silence, when grounded in truth, carries more weight than any argument. It exposes insecurity without saying a word. And it protects your energy from being dragged into pointless battles. Jesus didn't argue with people who were committed to misunderstanding him. He didn't waste his words on those who only listened to twist them. He knew that not every confrontation is worth the breath. And he taught us, through his actions, that silence can be holy. Silence can be strength. Silence can say, you no longer have access to my energy. If you're a chosen one, this matters deeply. Because you've probably spent too much time trying to explain yourself to people who never cared to understand you. You've probably poured your heart out to those who only responded with pride, mockery, or coldness. And maybe you were taught that walking away is giving up. But no, it's wisdom. Jesus didn't stay where his spirit wasn't honored. He moved on, with clarity and calm. And you're allowed to do the same. Not every relationship deserves another round. Not every argument needs your voice. Not every space is safe for your calling. Sometimes, you'll sense it deep in your soul. I've done all I can do, hey. And that's your moment to walk away. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in alignment. Jesus never begged people to accept him. He offered truth, and then he let them decide. When they chose pride, he chose distance. That wasn't rejection, it was redirection. It was him protecting his mission, his peace, and his power. You are allowed to do that too. You are not here to over-explain. You are not here to constantly defend your worth. You are not here to stay stuck in places where love is only one-sided. When Jesus left, he wasn't walking in defeat. He was walking in obedience. He knew that some soil just isn't fertile for growth. Some hearts just aren't open to truth. And some spaces become dangerous to your peace if you stay too long. That's not your failure, it's their choice. And when you honor your calling like Jesus did, you realize that walking away is often the beginning of something greater. Silence is not always a sign of weakness. Sometimes, it's the strongest, most powerful thing you can offer. And when that silence is rooted in clarity, in faith, and in self-respect, it becomes sacred. So if you've been torn, between speaking or staying silent, between staying or walking away, remember what Jesus did. He didn't cling to places that rejected him. He didn't beg people to change. He knew who he was. And because of that, he could walk away without losing his peace. You can too. That's not failure. That's spiritual power. There comes a moment when words are no longer enough. When truth must move beyond soft speech and turn into bold action. And Jesus, gentle, loving, patient Jesus, had that moment too. He walked into the temple, the most sacred place of worship, and what did he find? Tables, money changers, people selling forgiveness, people turning God's house into business. It wasn't just about money. It was the spirit behind it. Corruption, greed, a complete lack of reverence disguised as religion. And Jesus didn't just stand there giving a sermon. He didn't politely suggest they rethink their actions. No, he flipped the tables. Literally, he drove them out. He raised his voice. He took a whip and cleared the space. That wasn't rage without purpose. That was righteous anger. That was love defending what is holy. That was bold, protective energy rising against spiritual deception. Because when Jesus saw corruption hiding behind robes and rituals, he didn't tolerate it. He confronted it. Chosen ones need to understand this. Your spiritual awakening doesn't mean you stay quiet in the face of injustice. It doesn't mean you shrink back when something is wrong. It means you feel it deeply. You see it clearly. And sometimes, like Jesus, you are called to take action. Not out of ego, but out of alignment. Out of truth. There are times when flipping the table is the most spiritual thing you can do. When walking into a toxic space and refusing to accept business as usual is not rebellion, it's protection. Jesus did not protect systems that harmed the innocent. He did not align himself with religious performance that lacked real heart. And he was never afraid to be misunderstood by those who benefited from the corruption. He acted, knowing full well that people would whisper, question, and judge him for it. But he also knew, silence in the face of deception is agreement. And he wasn't about to agree with anything that violated God's purpose. That same fire lives in you. If you're a chosen one, you probably feel it. That sense that something is off when people perform spirituality but lack compassion. That quiet burn in your chest when someone uses God's name to control others. That holy frustration when truth is twisted for profit or image. You feel it because you were made to see it. And you see it because you were made to confront it. Flipping tables doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it means walking away from systems that abuse power. Sometimes it means speaking truth others are afraid to say. Sometimes it means protecting those who have no voice. And yes, sometimes it means choosing courage over comfort. Jesus didn't flip tables because he lost control. He did it because he was in control of himself, of his purpose, and of the atmosphere. He cleared the space because sacred places should never be run by selfishness. And that's your reminder too. Your heart, your mind, your spirit, those are sacred spaces. Don't let manipulation set up a table there. Don't let guilt or pride or performance take over what was meant for pure connection with God. Sometimes, love looks like kindness. And other times, love looks like confrontation. Both are holy. Both are Christ-like. And both are needed. So if you've been feeling that inner fire, don't ignore it. Jesus flipped tables for a reason. And when corruption disguises itself as righteousness in your life, your courage might just be the spark that sets things right again. There's something powerful about quiet truth. Not the kind that needs to prove itself. Not the kind that shouts to be heard. But the kind that simply is. The kind that walks into a room and shifts the air. The kind that makes liars nervous without a single word spoken. That's the kind of truth the chosen ones carry. It's not arrogance. It's not pride. It's spiritual discernment, the ability to see, to sense, to feel what's off, even when everything looks fine on the surface. That's why narcissists fear them. Not because chosen ones are loud. Not because they fight back with venom. But because they don't play the game. Chosen ones shine a light so bright, it exposes what others try to hide. And narcissists, those who live behind masks and illusions, can't stand to be seen. They crave control. They manipulate emotions, twist words, rewrite stories to make themselves the victim or the hero. But when a chosen one steps in, that illusion cracks. Without raising their voice, without defending every attack, the chosen one's presence alone reveals what's real and what's false. It's like holding up a mirror to a spirit that hates reflection. Narcissists thrive in environments where confusion reigns, where people doubt their own intuition, where truth feels slippery. But chosen ones come with clarity. They don't need to argue. They don't need to explain everything they know. Their spirit speaks before their mouth opens. It's unsettling to the deceivers because it cannot be manipulated. You see, narcissists build their world on lies, and lies only survive in darkness. But chosen ones carry light, and light doesn't scream to be noticed, it simply reveals. This is why, in spiritual warfare, your calm is power, your clarity is fire, your silence is often louder than any shout. When you see through someone, and you don't play along, they panic, because now, their illusion isn't working. Their tactics fall flat. Their web of control unravels. And they know, you see them. That's the most terrifying thing for a narcissist. Being truly seen. Not their mask, not their performance, but their motives, their wounds, their manipulation. Chosen ones don't just hear what people say. They hear what's not said. They don't just watch actions. They feel the energy underneath. That's discernment. And that's divine. This gift isn't something you learned. It's something placed inside you for a reason. It's why you've always felt things others didn't. Why you picked up on tension no one else noticed. Why you questioned things even when they looked perfect. You were never meant to be fooled by surface level. You were born to see beneath. And every time a narcissist crossed your path, it wasn't to destroy you. It was to awaken you. To show you what you carry. To remind you that you're not crazy for feeling what you feel. Your discomfort was your discernment speaking. And now, you walk differently. You don't waste time arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't chase after validation from those who only give affection when they want control. You see it now. And in seeing, you expose. That's your power. That's the light within you. And you don't need to prove it. You just need to be it. The more healed you become, the more threatening your peace is to those who thrive in chaos. The more whole you become, the less useful you are to people who only loved your brokenness. And the more awakened you become, the more exposed narcissists feel around you. They'll call you judgmental, cold, too much. Not because you are, but because they can't twist you anymore. They can't predict you. They can't guilt you into silence. And deep down, they know you've seen the truth. And once the truth is seen, it can't be unseen. Chosen ones carry that kind of vision. And vision is light. That's why your journey is so intense. That's why the spiritual attacks have been real. Because darkness always tries to dim the light before it exposes too much. But your light is not just for you. It's for others too. For the ones still trapped in confusion. For the ones still believing lies. For the ones who think manipulation is love. When you walk in truth, you become a safe space. A lighthouse. Not everyone will thank you for it. But those who are ready to heal, they'll find you. They'll recognize the light. Because it doesn't need to scream. It just shines. So don't doubt what you carry. Don't dim your vision to fit into fake peace. Don't explain your boundaries to people who benefit from crossing them. You were made for this. Your discernment isn't paranoia. It's protection. Your calm isn't weakness. It's wisdom. And your presence isn't passive. It's prophetic. Narcissists fear exposure. And chosen ones were born to reveal. You don't fight with fists. You fight with light. And light always wins. There's a deep misunderstanding in today's world about what true forgiveness means. People think that if you forgive someone, it means you should invite them back into your life. Trust them again. Act like nothing happened. But that's not what Jesus taught. Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself. It's a heart posture before God, not a permission slip for people to hurt you again. See, there's a difference between healing your heart and rebuilding a bridge. Jesus showed us that clearly. He forgave people, yes, but he didn't go chasing after those who rejected him. He didn't force relationships. He didn't keep throwing his pearls before swine. He forgave for heaven's sake, but he didn't ignore wisdom. Let's be honest. Some people show you exactly who they are through their patterns. Lying, gaslighting, controlling others with fake charm or spiritual mask. They say sorry with their mouth, but their behavior screams something different. If you're a chosen one, your spirit picks up on this. You feel when something isn't right, even if everyone else is fooled. That's spiritual discernment. And with that discernment comes responsibility. To not ignore the truth just to keep the peace. Because some bridges lead back to destruction, not destiny. You can't keep holding hands with someone who's pulling you into the fire. Jesus said, "Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves." That means walk in love, yes, but don't be naive. Even when he hung on the cross and said, "Father, forgive them," he wasn't saying, "Let them back into my circle." He was giving his heart to God, not to his abusers. That's the model. Forgive so that bitterness doesn't poison you, but guard your peace so they don't get to do it again. Forgiveness is spiritual, but access is earned. If someone breaks your trust and never truly repents, never shows change, never bears good fruit, you're not obligated to let them back in. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. Chosen ones often wrestle with guilt. You want to be loving, understanding, kind. You believe in second chances. But some people twist that against you. They wear the mask of a victim when they are the ones who caused the harm. They play on your empathy because they know your heart is pure. That's why God gave you discernment, so you don't fall into that trap again. Some people don't need another seat at your table. They need to eat the consequences of their choices. That's not revenge. That's God's order. Even Jesus drew boundaries. He walked away from cities that rejected his message. He remained silent when people tried to trap him. He didn't beg Judas to stay. Why? Because he knew their hearts. He forgave, but he didn't rebuild those bridges. The lesson was enough. The separation was necessary. And that's something we have to learn too, especially if we're walking in spiritual awareness. You don't owe anyone repeated access to your spirit just because you forgave them. Protecting your peace is honoring your purpose. When you forgive, you're handing the pain over to God. You're saying, "I trust you with the justice. I release the weight." But rebuilding the bridge, that takes accountability, humility, and real change from them, not just you. Without those things, the bridge just leads back to suffering. And that's not what God wants for you. Love your enemies. Yes. But love doesn't mean keep letting them in. Love can mean praying for them from a distance. Love can mean setting them free to face their own consequences. Love can mean letting go so you can grow. So if you've been struggling with this, wondering if forgiveness means you have to let them back in, let this be your answer. No, You are allowed to protect your heart. You are allowed to say, I forgive you, but I'm not going back. You are allowed to walk away with peace, not guilt, because forgiveness is between you and God. Access is between you and your healing. Let that truth settle in your spirit. Forgive. Be free. But don't rebuild the bridge if the path leads to more harm. Jesus didn't. And you don't have to either. Love is powerful. Love is divine. But love, as taught by Jesus, was never meant to be confused with weakness, blind tolerance, or allowing evil to stay unchecked in your life. Somewhere along the way, many of us were taught that to love like Jesus means always being available, endlessly patient, and never setting boundaries, even with people who are clearly destructive. But when we open our eyes and really study how Jesus operated, we begin to see the truth. Jesus was love, but he was never a doormat. Jesus loved deeply, but he also discerned deeply. He saw through people. He knew their hearts. And when someone was using false kindness, fake spirituality, or manipulative tactics to gain control or feed their ego, Jesus didn't tolerate it. He confronted it. He named it. And when necessary, he walked away. In fact, he even instructed his disciples that if a town did not receive them or their message, they were to shake the dust off their feet and move on. That's not bitterness. That's not hatred. That's wisdom. That's boundaries. See, love doesn't mean you ignore red flags. Love doesn't mean you keep someone close just because you've known them for years, or because they say the right things while doing the wrong things. Jesus himself said, by their fruits, you will know them. If someone claims to be good, kind, or godly, but their actions bring chaos, fear, or control into your life, then love, real love, might mean creating distance. It might mean protecting your peace. It might even mean closing that door. Some people hide behind spiritual language to excuse harmful behavior. You're supposed to forgive me, they say. You're supposed to love unconditionally. Yes, Jesus taught us to forgive. But forgiveness and access are two different things. You can forgive someone from the depths of your heart and still never allow them back into the sacred space of your life. Why? Because forgiveness is for you, to release the weight of bitterness. But access, that's earned through trust, respect, and integrity. Jesus didn't chase after everyone. When the rich man walked away after being told to sell his possessions, Jesus didn't run after him begging. When he was rejected in Nazareth, he didn't force his way in. Love has limits, and those limits protect your spirit. If Jesus, the Son of God, could draw boundaries, then you, especially as chosen one, have every right to do the same. Being a chosen one doesn't mean you walk around angry or bitter. It means you walk in wisdom. You understand that your time, your peace, your energy are sacred. You know when to pour in, and you know when to walk away. Love is not self-abandonment. It is not enduring abuse to prove your faith. It's not smiling through manipulation to appear holy. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let go. When Jesus said, shake the dust off your feet, he wasn't being petty. He was being spiritually strategic. Dusting off your feet means, I've done what I could. I've shown love. I've spoken truth. But now, I protect my path. That's not coldness. That's clarity. We've been conditioned to feel guilty when we protect ourselves from toxic people, especially spiritual narcissists, the wolves in sheep's clothing who twist love into control and humility into silence. But love that costs your mental health, your peace, and your purpose is not love. That's sacrifice. You don't have to keep sacrificing your soul to people who choose darkness. The next time someone tries to guilt you into staying in a one-sided relationship, remind yourself of Jesus' own actions. He flipped tables. He walked away. He confronted hypocrisy. And he also wept, prayed, and forgave. He was both lion and lamb, both healer and boundary setter. His love had strength, and his strength had compassion. That is the balance you are called to walk in. So no, love doesn't mean tolerating evil. It means seeing it clearly and choosing to rise above it, not by staying silent, but by staying grounded in truth. You can bless someone from afar. You can pray for someone while keeping your distance. You can be Christ-like without crucifying your own peace. Let this be your reminder. Jesus never told you to stay where you're constantly disrespected. He never said to keep pouring into people who drain your spirit. He taught compassion, but also wisdom. He gave grace, but he also gave warnings. And when the line was crossed, he walked on, leaving the dust and the drama behind him. If Jesus were physically walking among us today, watching the way so many people suffer quietly under manipulation, gaslighting, betrayal, and emotional abuse, he wouldn't tell you to keep taking it. He wouldn't ask you to keep begging people to treat you right. He wouldn't tell you to shrink yourself just to keep peace in places that were never safe to begin with. No, Jesus would empower you. He would look you in the eye with that piercing love that sees your whole story and still calls you chosen. He would remind you who you are, not through flattery, but through truth, because that's how Jesus always moved. He didn't plead with Pharisees to soften their hearts. He didn't chase down those who walked away. He didn't lose sleep over who misunderstood his mission. He kept walking. He kept speaking truth, boldly, with clarity, even when people didn't want to hear it. And that's exactly what he would teach you to do. Not to hate anyone, but to set boundaries. Not to seek revenge, but to seek truth. Not to dim your light, but to shine it even brighter. You see, chosen ones don't operate from ego. They operate from spiritual clarity. And Jesus would tell you this. You don't have to keep proving your worth to people who only recognize value when it benefits them. Your worth was already decided the moment God breathed life into you. So stop waiting for validation from broken places. Jesus never gave manipulators the power to rewrite his calling. He didn't fall for pretty words or fake repentance. He saw through the surface and spoke directly to the heart. He saw spiritual narcissists, those who looked righteous on the outside but were full of pride, control, and self-worship on the inside. And he exposed them. Not with anger, but with holy authority. That's what he'd want you to walk into. Because being chosen doesn't mean being soft for everyone. It means being available for God's voice, and unavailable to the voice of deception. It means loving from a pure heart, but also knowing when to walk away. It means offering forgiveness, but not rebuilding bridges with people who use your grace as a way to keep hurting you. Jesus would teach you how to guard your peace like it's sacred. Because it is. He'd remind you that turning the other cheek doesn't mean offering your soul to be trampled. It means refusing to let bitterness take root, even as you walk away with wisdom. Empowerment doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like silence in the face of provocation. Sometimes it looks like blessing someone with your distance. Sometimes it looks like choosing joy in a place where they expected you to fall apart. Jesus would want you to know. You were never called to be a slave to manipulation. You are not required to stay small just to make others feel more powerful. You are not meant to lose yourself in the name of peacekeeping, when that peace is one-sided and built on lies. Jesus never told people to stay in spiritually abusive systems. He called them out. He flipped tables. He left towns. He let people go. He empowered the outcasts, the broken-hearted, the humble, the brave. And that's you. That's who he still walks with today. He doesn't need you to chase toxic people. He needs you to walk in truth. He needs you to carry the fire of discernment. He needs you to protect the light inside you from being used by people who only want it when it serves them. You were chosen for more than survival. You were chosen to break cycles, to expose darkness with your light, to be a living example of what healing, courage, and boundaries look like. And even if it makes others uncomfortable, Jesus would say, let them be uncomfortable. Because he never came to make everyone feel good. He came to bring truth. Even when it divided households, exposed corruption, and called people to change. He would not sugarcoat narcissism. He would not call abuse love. He would not tell you to keep handing your heart to people who've proven they only want to use it. He would give you strength to stand. He would give you courage to say no. And he would remind you that love does not mean tolerating evil. That's not weakness. That's divine wisdom. So if you've been told that to be a good Christian, you must endure endless cycles of pain, remember Jesus. Remember how he carried both grace and fire. Remember how he offered mercy but never allowed manipulation. And let that same spirit rise in you. What would Jesus do today? He would lift your chin, heal your wounds, and remind you, you don't have to fight for a seat at anyone's table. You carry the kingdom. You are the table. And when you walk in that truth, when you let go of needing to be understood or accepted by those who only wish to drain you, narcissists lose their power over you. You become spiritually untouchable. Not perfect, but free. And that's what Jesus always came to give. Freedom, not fear. Truth, not shame. Power, not passivity. So walk boldly. Walk kindly. But most of all, walk away when you need to. Because you're not walking alone. You're walking with Christ. When you go through a true spiritual awakening, something deep inside of you shifts. It's not just a mindset change. It's a soul-level transformation. The fog lifts. You begin to see people, situations, and even yourself differently. And one of the most powerful things you start recognizing, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the spiritual mind games that narcissists play. It's not that they suddenly stop existing. It's that your awakened spirit no longer entertains the lies. Your discernment becomes sharp. The fake kindness that once fooled you, you now see it for what it really is, a mask. The guilt trips, the charm, the subtle digs wrapped in compliments, they no longer confuse you because your spirit is alert. This is the beauty of awakening. Your soul develops boundaries that your mouth may have struggled to voice before. Where once you may have doubted yourself, now you quietly observe and simply know. You know when someone's energy is wrong. You feel it in your chest, in your gut, in your spirit. And instead of questioning yourself, you step back. Not in fear, but in clarity. See, before awakening, you may have thought love meant fixing people, proving your worth, staying silent to keep the peace, or giving chance after chance because you saw the good in them. But now, after awakening, you realize love does not require self-betrayal. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. Peace does not mean tolerating evil. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop overfunctioning in relationships where you're the only one showing up. You stop reacting to the bait narcissists throw your way, because you now know their tactics. Silence becomes your strength. Distance becomes your protection. And presence, your healed, glowing presence, becomes your loudest statement. Spiritual awakening doesn't make you cruel. It makes you clear. And when you're clear, narcissists lose their grip. They thrive in confusion, in chaos, in emotional entanglement. But when your heart is anchored in truth, their strategies no longer stick. They look for openings, for insecurity, for wounds they can exploit. But your healing has sealed those doors. That's why they fear the awakened. That's why they push harder at first, trying to draw you back into old patterns. But you don't dance to their rhythm anymore. Your soul has found a new tempo, one that's aligned with truth, peace, and purpose. And it shows. You speak differently. You walk differently. You even sit in silence with a different energy. Narcissists can sense it, and it makes them uncomfortable, because you're no longer feeding their ego. You're no longer buying the performance. You've seen behind the curtain. You've heard their rehearsed lines before. And now, instead of questioning your memory or your wife, you walk away with confidence, not bitterness. That's the power of spiritual awakening. It doesn't just help you survive narcissistic abuse. It makes you immune to it, because you no longer need the approval they withhold. You no longer chase what drains you. You recognize manipulation not as love gone wrong, but as control in disguise. You understand that some people use empathy as a tool, but you no longer hand your empathy to anyone who asks. Your love is still strong, but it's no longer blind. Your heart is still open, but it's no longer unguarded. And you know what? That's not cold. That's wisdom. Even Jesus told us to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. Even Jesus walked away from those who only came to trap him in words. Even he remained silent in the face of pride, flipped tables when holiness was being mocked, and warned us of wolves in sheep's clothing. That same spirit now lives in you. The spirit that sees. The spirit that discerns. The spirit that doesn't need to argue, prove, or please, because truth is its foundation. That's why awakened souls are narcissists' greatest foe. Not because they fight, but because they don't. They don't bite the hook. They don't dance in the drama. They don't waste time proving anything. They simply shine, and that light exposes what darkness tries to hide. That light is your armor. That light is your truth. That light is your freedom. You no longer bend yourself into a version someone else can use. You no longer silence your truth to make others comfortable. You no longer perform to earn love. You simply are, and that's enough. So if you felt yourself pulling away from certain people, from places where you once belonged, from dynamics that used to drain you, it's not you being difficult. It's your spirit protecting itself. You're not bitter. You're wise. You're not unloving. You're finally loving yourself. That's what spiritual awakening gives you. Sight. The kind of sight that doesn't just see people's words, it sees their spirit. And once you start seeing with spiritual eyes, you don't unsee. You stop asking, why did they treat me this way? And start saying, thank God I see it now. That clarity is your gift. That clarity is your armor. That clarity is your freedom. Spiritual awakening doesn't just set you free, it keeps you free. It builds an inner foundation that no storm can shake, no narcissist can poison, and no lie can weaken. And once you're rooted in that truth, your soul becomes untouchable. That's what makes you narcissist-proof. Many people get the image of Jesus all wrong. They only see the soft side, gentle, kind, forgiving. And yes, Jesus was all of those things. He healed the broken, embraced the outcast, and forgave even his enemies. But let's not forget, he also had fire. He had boldness. He spoke truth even when it made people uncomfortable. He stood up to the proud and exposed the fake. That balance, compassion with courage, is exactly what the chosen ones carry within them. If you're a chosen one, you're not here to blend in or keep the peace at all costs. You're here to reflect the full heart of Christ. That means, yes, loving deeply, but it also means standing firm when lies and manipulation show up. You aren't called to be everyone's comfort zone. Some people will be offended by your light, because your light reveals what they tried to hide. That's not your fault. It's your gift. Just like Jesus, you carry both the lamb and the lion. You don't have to water yourself down to be accepted. You were never made to fit into the world's version of nice. You were made to carry a presence that shifts atmospheres, that unsettles what's fake, and that burns away what's false. That's the fire of Christ in you. There comes a moment on the spiritual path when something deep within you clicks, not in a loud or flashy way, but in a quiet, powerful shift that changes how you see everything, especially people, especially manipulators, especially narcissists. Where once you were confused, reactive, or caught in endless cycles of emotional entanglement, now there's clarity. Not because you've learned their tricks, but because you've remembered who you are. You've awakened. And in that awakening, you become narcissist-proof, not because narcissists disappear, but because their games no longer work on a soul that has stepped into its power. Before spiritual awakening, most people are governed by their wounds. They crave approval, fear abandonment, and are constantly seeking love and safety outside themselves. Narcissists thrive on this. They know how to spot that hunger, how to mirror love, how to drip-feed validation, and then twist it into control. They exploit the parts of you that haven't healed yet, the fear of not being good enough, the need to please, the ache to be seen. But when you awaken, the game ends. Not because they stop playing, but because you stop participating. Spiritual awakening isn't just about crystals, meditation, or talking about energy. It's a sacred unraveling of everything false, and a rising into everything eternal. It's when you realize you're not your pain, your past, or your patterns. You're something far greater, an eternal soul having a temporary experience. And in that realization, your energy changes.